What's up, ProGuides family? My name is Nathan Ng, and today we're going to be talking about the 5 things that all low ELO players need to know. Every person that has ever played CSGO has been a low ELO player at some point, and I was too, obviously. In this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 things that I wish somebody had told me when I was first starting out, because I know it would have helped me a ton. Before we get started on that though, today it's time for our question of the day. What type of playstyle do you have? Personally, I would say I have a pretty aggressive playstyle, though oftentimes it just means that I run it down a lot. Just die and give up my guns. But before, I would always play quite passively, but nowadays I'm getting a lot more joy of just going in and then just trying to frag out. What about you guys though? Make sure to let us know in the comments down below. Okay, speaking of, the first thing that low ELO players need to know is that it's important to have an aggressive playstyle, especially in the lower ranks. If you guys have been watching the past couple of videos, I cannot reiterate this enough. Players that don't have an aggressive playstyle in general have much less impact on the game, meaning that regardless of whether they win or lose, it's probably not up to them. Of course, you want to avoid this since you want to be the one that's winning your teammates' rounds, because if you keep playing consistently, you'll be able to carry the games. If you're having a bad game, you may just want to be able to rely on your teammates in higher rank, but in Silver or Gold Nova, that's probably not the case. It's hard to rely on some people. Because of this, it's better if you develop an aggressive playstyle and then fine-tune from there. It's way easier to play passively than aggressively, so if you learn how to play aggressively, it's not that hard to adjust. By having an aggressive playstyle, like I mentioned in the question of the day, you also guarantee that you have lots of action and therefore more chances to improve. If you develop this playstyle, it's a lot more likely that you'll be getting into gunfights, therefore you're forced to practice your aim and decision making, therefore you are quote-unquote limit testing. If you instead just sit back and you're the only one practicing your patience, although it is important in higher ranks, you won't offer anything in your current rank and you will only negatively affect your chances of improving. If you don't have an aggressive playstyle yet, reconsider if you want to play so passively. Basically, it really amps up the fun of this game, and I guarantee you that it'll definitely help you climb if you keep improving and putting yourself in those situations. Another thing that a lot of low ELO players aren't really aware of is the state of their mechanics. A lot of low ELO players have this pitfall of falling into the idea that their mechanics are good. I'm not saying that they're horrible, I'm just saying that there's a lot of improving that you can do. This has to do with an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect. We won't go too far in depth in this video, but basically all this is saying is that if you're new to a certain skill, you can't see all the intricacies of it, which basically means that you can't improve on all of those exact parts. There's a saying of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and that's precisely what's going on here. As soon as you learn the basics of the game, you will start grasping new concepts, and as soon as you grasp those concepts, you'll have to learn way more and realize that this game has way more depth to it, or just skill in general. This is something that happens a lot with players in the lower ranks, and the only way to get rid of it is either to continue playing and hoping to learn, or just by subscribing to ProGuides.com. They don't even pay me to say that. Once you realize that you're not actually global elite and probably stuck in the lower ranks, then for whatever reason this time, you'll start improving again. What it is acknowledging your problems, because if you do not acknowledge your problems, you cannot improve on it, and if you cannot improve on it, well then you're not going to get global elite. For the next thing that a lot of low ELO players struggle with is having to make excuses. An obscene amount of players are constantly making excuses for themselves, and that happens especially in the lower ranks. Not saying it doesn't happen in the higher ranks as well, because it definitely happens there. Sure, always having excuses might be good for your confidence, which is also important, but at the same time, they are also detrimental to your long-term improvement. Kind of like what I was just saying before, I'm not saying that it's not okay to realize that there are faults in the game that are out of your control. I'm just saying that if you don't realize that sometimes the problem is you cannot improve. Realistically, or sometimes even harshly reflecting on yourself, or maybe not go too harshly, you'll be more inclined to work on the areas of the game that you could definitely use some improvement on. But if you feel like, on the other hand, that you don't need to improve at all, then you're basically going to say that you're perfect, and then you know what, you're going to stunt your growth. If you just played a bad game, that's honestly okay, it happens to everybody. But let's go ahead and say that your sprays on the M4A4 were off, then you can't really blame the M4 for the slight randomness of the spray pattern, but instead your ability to shoot the gun. Now it's time to hop onto the deathmatch server, aimbots or recoil master, and then work on that area of the game. I know some of you guys aren't fully convinced yet, and you're still pretty much believing in some excuses that you made for yourself. I decided to name and debunk a handful of them, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Excuse number 1. My settings are the ones holding me back. A lot of players are somehow firmly convinced that they are missing shots or are otherwise not as good as they could be because of their settings. That's not always true, but sometimes, if this is your settings, try finding one that is preferable to you so you could stop blaming it. There's a lot of people who truly think that it's not just them just being as good as they are, but rather that players are better than them are just using better settings. Whether you think it's your sensitivity, crosshair, game settings, view models, or video settings that's the issue, I can tell you confidently that it's probably not. But if you do have a problem with these settings, then try fixing them. And if you're still losing games when you found your perfect settings, it's not because somebody's settings is better than you, that's just not the way it works. Basically, all I'm saying is that settings do matter, just not in the way that you think. You're not losing because somebody else's settings are better than you, you're probably losing because your settings aren't quite fit for you, and that could be changed. Another thing a lot of players like to put the blame on is their teammates. This one happens in every single game and not just CSGO. Yes, the only reason that we lost a game and the sole reason that we are in the current ranks are bad teammates. Blaming teammates for you and your rank is very common in team-based games, and it's very easy to fall into this pitfall. But honestly, it's really holding you back. Statistically, it makes no sense that you're the only one getting bad teammates, and honestly, it's not the case either. The reason that we say this is because everyone has a different view of the game and not everyone's view necessarily match. Although some views are flawed, in some ways so are yours. It really means that your teammates aren't actually as bad as you think, but just have a different view of the game, and if you guys aren't on the same page of those views, then those plays aren't really going to work. A lot of players that believe the reason they're not ranking up is because their teammates are the same people that believe that there is some sort of ELO hell. Yes, there are some ELOs that are way more fun to play in my opinion. It doesn't really mean that you're stuck there because of that ELO. If you think this way, I recommend you guys to maybe try changing your mindset. Vu, a CSGO YouTuber, actually is making a series on how people are supposedly stuck in ELO hell, so if you aren't fully convinced yet, we'd recommend you guys check that out. Another reason that people blame are Smurfs. Smurfs are players that make new accounts that play on a second account with a lower rank to stomp against players that are lower than them. Smurfing is prevalent in all ranks, but the lower you go, the more Smurfs you'll see. Smurfing in Global, Elite, or Legendary Eagle happens too, but that can only be done by the top 0.01% of the games, while essentially everyone above Silver can Smurf in Silver. We do realize that Smurfing is a huge problem, but we don't agree that it's a valid excuse. This is the way I think of it. The chance of you getting a Smurf on your team is equal to the chance of them getting a Smurf on their team. The more that you play the games, the more statistically this will cancel out. Yes, they do affect the game, and yes, it is a negative experience, but the more games you play, the more consistent that you will inevitably climb. So honestly, Smurfing does suck, but it's something that is part of the game, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. Personally, Smurfing in this game does suck, and playing with it is not an enjoyable experience. But if you guys are playing consistently, I guarantee you guys will be able to improve and get out of this ELO. For our last excuse on the list, we have low FPS or refresh rate. A lot of players, and honestly admittedly myself, has thought at one point that upgrading to a 144Hz screen will magically make you better. And I used to think, oh man, if I could only get better monitor, I'd be so much better. My aim would be better, my reactions would be better, and everything would feel smoother. It would be great. When I first got my monitor though, I played one of my worst games in a long time and I was so confused. Fast forward to a few years later, and I'm now aware that having higher FPS or better refresh rate won't make you better. It might allow for a smoother and more enjoyable experience, and going back to something that isn't smooth might feel bad to play one and will make you play worse, but not the other way around unless you're literally playing at 15 FPS. For our next thing that all low ELO players have got to know is that we all have bad games, and that is okay. Every single player will have bad games sometimes, and that's nothing to be ashamed about. Of course, we understand that playing below your expectations of what you think that you should be able to play at sucks, but this isn't the end of the world, and by worrying about it, you'll only make it worse. If you're having another bad game, don't panic. Don't switch all of your settings, but just play accordingly. We've actually made a video about this topic, specifically about how to be truly consistent, and it talks about developing your A, B, and C games and how to utilize them based off the games that you're having. If you want to look more into this video, we'll be leaving a link in the description down below. Basically, to sum it all up, if you're having a bad game and you feel like aiming isn't really good for you, you're having a C game. And if you're having a C game, maybe take a step back, be a little bit more passive, throw yourself in front of your teammates, sacrifice yourself, get more information, but maybe don't try to aim your best and don't have that expectation for yourself. The last thing that we really want you guys to know is that if you're new to the game, focus on certain aspects first. If you're in low ELO, chances are that you don't really know all there is to CS yet, and that's only natural. But if you want to speed up your improvement, you should be focusing on learning on a few basics. If you're starting to learn the game, you should probably decide what you want to improve on first and then zero in on that. Trying to learn everything at once is actually pretty ineffective, and you'll definitely get overwhelmed, so decide what it is that you want to prioritize first. For example, if you're a new player, it's alright if you want to focus on your aiming, counter-strafing, or crosshair placement first, and maybe your other things such as positioning and rotating and communicating takes a hit, but it's okay because you're going to be able to work on that later on. Whatever it is, what you focus on doesn't really matter as long as you are able to focus on at least something, as this will make sure that you won't get overwhelmed and that you'll be progressing at a steady pace right through the gate. Well, that's gonna be it, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you ring that notification bell to get notified on content such as this. If you guys want to improve at a faster rate and a more efficient rate, go ahead and check out ProGuides.com and get yourself a coach, as it will definitely help you guys realize your faults and improve on them. From my personal experience, I can definitely say that this has helped me a lot, and I'm sure that it can definitely help you guys. With that, I wish you guys have a great and amazing day. Stay safe and stay healthy. Peace.